So I worked at the Juvenile Domestic Relations Court in Portsmouth, which was really wonderful for me because I had a bachelor's degree in sociology/social work. When I started there, the judges, my supervisor, everyone was just absolutely wonderful. And part of your responsibility is to do case histories. So the judge would have the probation officer sitting in the courtroom, and he would assign you families to do case histories with. And as I went on my first couple of to my first couple of families, I would go out and I finally told myself they would find all the dogs they could in the neighborhood and put in their yard, which would bark at me and scare me to death and wouldn't let me in their house. So a couple of things happened. They would slam the door in my face. They would prevent me from coming to the house. They would call me names, okay? And we met weekly with our supervisor. So my first week there, I was given some cases, and she was asking for the status of those cases. And I would say, well, this family wouldn't let me in, and this family wouldn't let me in, and this family wouldn't let me in. She said, what do you mean they wouldn't let you in? I said, they wouldn't let me in. And so I had to recount exactly what happened with those families that prevented me from coming in. So she stepped out of the room, went and talked to the judge, and the judge came back and said, those families who don't let me in will be in contempt of court. And so he sent them a contempt of court order. And so then when I went back, they did let me in, but you could feel the tension, okay, in the room as I came in. I'm surprised I was able to do anything because I was a basket case in terms of being very nervous because I didn't know what would happen to me in their house. You know, I really had that fear. But then I remembered I was a mod squad. Mod squad didn't have fear. Okay, so I just accepted as this is what I'm supposed to do and gained my confidence and went in and said, here's the judge sent me, and the judge said, and I use the judge's name all the time in every other sentence. Okay, and that gave me what I felt was power, and it gave me confidence. And so I was able to work through getting the case histories, and the dogs were no longer a problem, and those kinds of things. And the judge would say in court, if you don't let the caseworker in, the probation officer in, you will be charged with contempt of court, and you could be fined X number of dollars and spend so much time in jail. So he made that part of his assignment to everybody, black families and white families. That was part of the assignment that he gave out to everybody. So they knew if I did not come in, they were going to have to come back to court and explain what happened, and something bad could happen to them. One of the incidents that really frightened me was the fact that I went out, I drove a cute little Volkswagen Beetle, which was the greatest car in the world, okay? And I came out from work one evening, and my car had all kinds of epithets on it. Just horrible language, magic marker everywhere, just the N-word all over the place of my car, which really kind of frightened me a bit. I went back, got the police who came out and took a police report, and the police took me home. And then what started to happen was I started to ride around a lot with the police, which was pretty good, okay, to be able to do that, particularly in neighborhoods that weren't as inviting as other neighborhoods. But it was a really good experience. From there, my husband came back to Portsmouth, picked me up, and my child up, and we came back to Northern Virginia. He went on to Fort Belvoir for another 6 months. And then from there, we went on to Karlsruhe, Germany, which was a bigger town, and we spent 4 years in Karlsruhe. The one thing I remember about Karlsruhe that I thought was just so exciting was the base commander there needed someone to be in charge of the drug and alcohol center because they were having a drug and alcohol problem. This would have been in the 70s with the senior enlisted as well as the officers. And they had in the center counselors that they had trained, but they were privates and E1s and E2s. So he did not want them talking to the NCOs commissioned as well as the officers. So I ended up getting hired to do just that. There was a second lieutenant who was in charge of the CDAC. Well, actually, the first sergeant was in charge of the CDAC. the second lieutenant was there. And the first sergeant was a recovering alcoholic that was a really big, gruff guy who actually fell in love with me, which was wonderful. But he was hard. He would not let me go. If I didn't go to lunch at 12, because lunch was 12 to 1, he locked me in, the center, because everybody went to lunch. And I ended up climbing out the window because I wanted to go to lunch at 12:30 or 1 o'clock. And he would get so angry with me. He'd call me Miss Venus, Miss Venus. And one of the things I found as I was packing up stuff was a certificate that he had given me when I left, that all the bad things I had done. And he said, but we loved you for all of them, which was absolutely wonderful. But that was a great time because I really got in to do lots of work with the soldiers. And the soldiers really began to learn and respect me as a counselor and someone that was their advocate. There was a lot of times we did have the Chapter 13 people from Collinsville back to the States because of their drug or alcohol use. But I worked a lot with the families of the soldiers, the non-commissioned officers and their families, which was really wonderful because you could see in the family dynamics those relationships changing as you work with the families and families becoming very, very successful. And for someone in the social work field, that was just really exciting to be able to see.
And so these were predominantly white families?
These were predominantly white families.
And so they were beginning to accept you? They could look beyond the color of your skin?
They could look beyond the color of my skin because they were mandated to do so. As a non-commissioned officer, if you were a staff sergeant, and the base commander said, you need help because you keep getting drunk and you keep getting in trouble. You need to talk to this person. And they knew they had to do that in order to stay in the military. And of course, I learned quickly how to use the base commander's name a lot. So that again was the power that the base commander had given me. And I ended up using that power, to get through, to those non-commissioned officers. And I think that there was prejudice. I know there was prejudice there. But again, it wasn't overt. And we were the only African-American officers in that unit. And because my husband was an officer, there was a certain amount of acceptance there. So because of the rank. And so I kind of fell into that. I didn't do well with the Officers' Wives Club because I worked and my work was strange. A lot of times I didn't understand what the kind of work I was doing. But base commander thought I was better than peanut butter, which was absolutely great.
And your husband went to ROTC at Norfolk State?
He went to ROTC at Norfolk State, and he was commissioned as a result of having finished his degree. Wow. He was an engineer, and he built bridges, and all kinds of things that engineers do.
And so you leave Germany,
yes,
and you come back to Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia, come back to good old Northern Virginia.
You just love coming back to Northern Virginia. I love coming back
to Northern Virginia. I accepted Northern Virginia as my home at that time, and came back to Northern Virginia and was looking for a job. Decided we were at Fort Belvoir at the time. I decided I really wanted to go into drug and alcohol. That was my background from overseas. They were not they meaning the government and private places were not hiring drug and alcohol counselors. So I was at the education center, and this guy said, oh, community college just opened down in Woodbridge. They're looking for counselors. Well, I didn't know where Woodbridge was, and I didn't know what a community college was. And they said, well, you're really interested in community college? I don't know anything about a community college. They were just, they were getting started when I was overseas, so I had no knowledge of what they were. And I said, oh yeah, I remember, I did apply to Northern Virginia Community College because they did have a counselor position. And the guy said, oh, you really do need to go talk to the dean of students down there. I said, oh, okay. It's another interview for me. I really wanted to stay in drug and alcohol. So I'll go. How far is that away? Well, come to find out, it was just right down the road. And so I went down and interviewed. It took me a while because the college at that point was in a trailer outside of the old Woodbridge High School, which is now Woodbridge Middle School. And so it took me a while to find it because York Drive is not quite off the main roads at that time, because Route 1 was kind of the main road at that time. There was Shirley Highway, but Route 1 was kind of the main road through Woodbridge. So it took me a while to find it. So I was a little late for the interview. But I did finally found it. We didn't have cell phones back then either, so you couldn't call it. I said I'm going to be late. Okay, but I did find him and interviewed with him, and thought it was a great interview, good conversation, back and forth. And he said, well, they're moving to the new Woodbridge High School because Woodbridge High School now was moving to Old Bridge Road, their present location. And another couple of weeks they would be moving there. He'd get in touch with me after the move. I said, okay. So I went on back to Fort Belvoir, sitting around wondering I need to do something. I can't just stay here and do nothing. And he called me the next day and said, you're hired. I'm hired? I thought you were going to call me in a couple of weeks. So he said, you're hired. When can you start work? I said, whenever you want me to. I don't know anything about the community college. He said, well, go over to the education center, get a catalog, and can you start Monday? I said, sure. I don't see why not. And he said, well, we want you to be the counselor at Fort Belvoir. I said, get out of here. Get out of here. I said, sure. So Monday morning, so I go get the catalog, spend the weekend reading about community college. There were no Google searches. At the time you couldn't Google. So I read the catalog front to cover 2 or 3 times, getting a sense of what it was all about. And went to work at Fort Belvoir Monday morning. The other counselor was there, and he kind of showed me the ropes, and he worked with me for probably the first 2 or 3 weeks. And at that point, you did everything. You did registration, and you took forms, and you did applications, and you recruited, and the whole 9 yards. So it was actually a really good introduction to me, and I